The men that negotiated with God. Number 1. Abraham. Shortly after Abraham's covenant of circumcision, he was visited by what appeared to be 3 men standing near him. However, the text makes it clear that it was actually the Lord and 2 angels. Like the appearances of the Old Testament of the angels of the Lord, or the commander of the army of the Lord. Genesis 18:1. Amplified Bible. Now the Lord appeared to Abraham by the terebinth trees of Mamre in Hebron, while he was sitting at the tent door in the heat of day. Despite the fact that Abraham had no idea who these visitors were at the moment, he rushed to show them hospitality. Genesis 18. Then the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him, so that he will direct his children and his household after him, to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him." Then the Lord said, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know." Here we see that Abraham's covenant with God has put him on a different level on the world stage. It gave him access to God's boardroom. Abraham's no longer a regular man. He was a stakeholder in world affairs as a sort. And God, who doesn't approve, decided to make Abraham a voice in this. Sodom's sin was great. It consisted of gross immorality, violence, and oppression of the poor. Ezekiel 16:49-50. Amplified Bible. Behold, this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters, outlying cities, had arrogance, abundant food, and careless ease. But she did not help the poor and needy. They were haughty and committed repulsive acts before me. Therefore I removed them when I saw it. With the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah approaching, God took another break to give them a second chance. This time Abraham would be part of the forbearing process. Will you really sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Abraham appealed to God's justice. Following that, there's a strange scene that sounds like it could happen in a vegetable store. Abraham was attempting to talk God down. And surprisingly enough, God played along. Now the 2 men, angelic beings, turned away from there and went towards Sodom. But Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Abraham approached the Lord and said, "Will you really sweep away the righteous, those who do right, with the wicked, those who do evil? Suppose there are 50 righteous people within the city. Will you really sweep it away and not spare it for the sake of the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to strike the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked are treated alike. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right by exalting just and righteous judgment?" So the Lord said, "If I find within the city of Sodom 50 righteous people, then I will spare the entire place for their sake." Abraham answered, "Now behold, I who am but dust in origin and ashes have decided to speak to the Lord. If 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking, will you destroy the entire city for lack of 5? And he said, "If I find at least 45 righteous people there, I will not destroy it." Abraham spoke to him yet again and said, "Suppose only 40 are found there." And he said, "I will not do it for the sake of 40 who are righteous." Then Abraham said to him, "Oh, may the Lord not be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 righteous people are found there." And he said, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." And he said, "Now behold, I have decided to speak to the Lord again. Suppose only 20 righteous people are found there." And the Lord said, "I will not destroy it for the sake of 20." Then Abraham said, "May the Lord not be angry with me, and I will speak only this once. Suppose 10 righteous people are found there." And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 10. As soon as he had finished speaking with Abraham, the Lord departed, and Abraham returned to his own place. Genesis 18:22-33, Amplified Bible. The negotiation continued for 45, for 40, 30, 20, even just 10. Each time God granted Abraham's plea in response to his loving prayer, God was not only allowing Abraham to ask for more, but he was actually urging him to do so. This entire sequence corresponds to Matthew 5:13-16, when Jesus refers to believers as salt of the earth and light of the world, respectively. As members of God's kingdom, it is our responsibility to function as a preserving influence in a dying and dark world. It's worth noting that if there had just been 10 Christians in the city, God would have spared the entire city. Even a small group of righteous people can spread righteousness in such a way as that the entire society benefits. Abraham was a truly loyal and kind man that cared about people. He often took it upon himself to see others free from hurt, and this is probably why he was very successful. One of the ways he showed the largeness of his heart was to pray for the people of Sodom and Gomorrah after he heard of their impending destruction. God had gotten fed up with the atrocities of the people in this land, so much that he made up his mind to punish them. However, Abraham had a real and deep relationship with God, so he was informed about the Creator's will to erase these wicked people from the face of the earth because of their grave sins. Abraham had the opportunity to encourage God to destroy Sodom because of the way he parted ways with his nephew Lot. He could have said Lot was a very greedy person and deserved whatever befell Sodom. But he knew that a lot of persons would lose their lives, and it was the most important thing for him that they be saved. Our duty as believers is to intercede for those that are lost and not condemn them to an unrighteous life. Abraham established a principle in his first exchange with God. God would not destroy the righteous along with the wicked. As soon as that principle was established, it was simply a matter of numbers. How many righteous people would God spare the city for? Abraham's intercession was effective because it was specific. He talked about specific numbers with God, and not only in broad, general terms. Often our prayers are ineffective because we really don't ask the Lord to do anything. Instead, we usually just toss wishes up to heaven. Abraham continued his intercession with bold humility. He was not proud or arrogant before the Lord, yet he still continued to ask. In his prayer, Abraham did not ask why or demand that God explained himself or his actions, demonstrating his humility. Abraham was a skilled negotiator, and he prevailed upon God to lower the number of righteous required to spare the city, first by units of 5, then by units of 10, until the number settled at 10. Abraham's persistence in intercession cannot be overlooked, because only 4 people were righteous in the city. We wonder if Abraham should not have continued the negotiations. Could Abraham have asked God to spare the city for 4? During his time in Sodom, Lot may have brought 6 people to God besides his own family. God patiently listened to him, but since his last request of finding at least 10 people and cancelling his plans to destroy these evil cities fell through, angels were dispatched to blot it out. Thankfully, their first task was to rescue Lot's family before destroying the city. Judging by this solution from God, it's obvious that Abraham's negotiation with God came from a place of deep companionship and assurance. Number 2. Moses. God had every cause to destroy the Israelites in the wilderness, considering their ungratefulness despite all he did to rescue them from their slave masters. He gave them favor and abundance in Egypt, destroyed their stronghold, subdued their army, and set them free permanently. All of these happened through God's mighty hand, prompting Pharaoh to demand that they must leave Egypt. Despite all of these great miracles that the Israelites witnessed firsthand, they still turned their backs on God by making a golden calf of the purpose of worship, even though God was against this. Naturally, Moses should have been eager for God's wrath on this stiff-necked people so that he could be free from the burden of leadership. But Moses pleaded with God to spare them and give them a second chance. While Moses was on Mount Sinai retrieving the Ten Commandments, the Israelites did something that we see frequently in the Old Testament. They became irritated. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered round Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." Exodus 32:1. Moses was on the mountain for a long time, receiving instructions from the Lord. 40 days and 40 nights, in fact. That was apparently too long for the Israelites. They were tired of waiting and were impatient. They despised the one whom God used to deliver them from slavery. This Moses, we don't know what happened to him. They also demanded that Aaron create an idol to lead them in Moses' and the Lord's place. A rejection of the first two commandments and a repudiation of their vow to obey the Lord. Tragically, Aaron listened to them and told them to bring him gold, which he fashioned into the image of a calf. This is an important choice because the Egyptians and Canaanites, the original inhabitants of the land promised to Israel, were known for their deities shaped like calves. As a result, Israel scorned the great I Am who had rescued them and instead worshipped a false god of the nations. The praise that was due to God alone was bestowed upon a gold statue. Aaron declared that they would hold a festival to the Lord, and the people brought burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Don't forget that they referred to this idol as the Lord while performing sacrifices as prescribed by the true Lord. Religious synthesis always leads to false religion. When idolatry is mixed with Christianity, Christianity is no longer the same. People sat down to eat and drink before getting up to party. They were clearly not having a harmless celebration. Its foundation was rejection of the true God, and the party most likely incorporated corrupt cultic practices from other nations, such as drunkenness and immorality. Moses had been on the mountain for days in God's presence and was completely unaware of what was going on. God informed Moses that Moses' people, notice he did not say my people, had acted corruptly and had quickly abandoned God in favor of idol worship. The Lord declared that they were a stiff-necked people who would be destroyed. After all, he would be able to turn Moses into a great nation instead. But Moses sought the favor of the Lord his God. "Lord," he said, "why should your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, 'It was with evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains and to wipe them off the face of the earth'? Turn from your fierce anger, relent, and do not bring disaster on your people. Remember your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, to whom you swore by your own self, 'I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and I will give your descendants all this land I promised them, and it will be their inheritance forever.' Then the Lord relented and did not bring on his people the disaster he had threatened." Exodus 32:11-14. Rather than accepting the idea of being the patriarch of a new nation without the existing Israelites, Moses begged God not to destroy Israel. He appealed not to their merit, but to God's reputation and character. First, Moses said that the Egyptians would ridicule God's name and claim that he had brought Israel out only to kill them. Second, he reminded the Lord of his promise to the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Israel to raise up a great nation from their offspring. And as a result of Moses' intercession, the Lord relented and didn't totally destroy the Israelites. This brings us to a critical point. God has stated that he does not change. Nonetheless, he declares that he may choose to relent and refrain from bringing threatened judgment upon a people if they change their ways. In other words, he may relent if people repent, or as in this case, as a result of intercessory prayer. This implies that when we relate to an aspect of God's character, he is free to change his actions without changing his character at all. That is, he's free to change the way he interacts with his people. God's decision not to destroy Israel did not imply that he had changed his mind about their sin. In reality, while he did not annihilate them, he did hold them accountable for their wrongdoing. As a result, God upheld his reputation, remained faithful to his word, and demonstrated his grace. Sin is no joke. It brings death. This is followed by another remarkable example of intercessory prayer in the Bible. Moses confessed the people's sin and pleaded for their forgiveness. If God refused to forgive them, Moses requested that God destroy him instead of them. He was ready to give his life for the ungrateful, sinful people. The Lord replied to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. Now go, lead the people to the place I spoke of, and my angel will go before you. However, when the time comes for me to punish, I will punish them for their sin." And the Lord struck the people with a plague because of what they did with the calf Aaron had made. Exodus 32, 33-35. God promised to hold the people accountable for their own sin in response to Moses' prayer. Though he did not intend to destroy the nation, he did address their sin by inflicting a plague. Even though Moses faithfully prayed and interceded for Israel, God could not allow him to take their sin upon himself and be punished in their place. Moses was himself a sinner, so he could not bear the sin of others. But one day, a holy, righteous man would come, the God-man, Jesus Christ. Without sin himself, Jesus would be able to bear and take away the sin of the world. The Bible has so many intercessors who prayed and stood in the gap for people, cities or nations, so that God's goodwill would come to pass in their lives. Every one of us, regardless of our profession, is saved to not just be a redeemed children of God, but to also become a ladder that pulls others out of the broad path of destruction, and prayer is at a foundation of this new assignment for all believers to bring others into this saving power of the cross. Therefore, whenever we see people trapped by darkness, sin, and Satan's bondage, our job is to intercede for them so that God's angels can be sent for their deliverance. Ezekiel 22:30. I looked for someone among them who would build up the wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land, so that I would not have to destroy it. But I found no one. Lord, I thank you for the comforting words in the Word of God that assures me that I can come boldly before you.